Hello, everybody. I'm working with a new light. Looks a little spooky. Anyway, yes, last summer, it wasn't quiet around here. No way. You know, everybody was out trying to make sourdough bread and gourmet dinners. Well, I tried one. I tried cioppino. Cioppino, you say it. That's a seafood stew, and it has shrimp and scallops and cod and red sauce and wine and garlic, and it was really good. But the best thing about it was I made enough for 2 nights. And it was on the second night that the whole story started. You see, all I had to do was put it in the microwave and turn it on and take it out. And I guess I wasn't really paying attention, but when I went to take it out, it was really hot and I was using a tea towel and I misjudged where the top of the counter was. And I knocked the Tupperware bowl into the counter and the Tupperware bowl took off like a flying saucer, spinning and spewing red sauce all over my kitchen. And when the last drop fell from one end to the other, it looked like the Red Sea, complete with fish. You know, the shrimp and the scallops. And the cabinets and the appliances, they looked like an episode from Dateline. You know, when there's a mass murder in the kitchen. I didn't know what to do. I had to do it quickly because now I had to make another dinner. So I just gave it what my mother called a lick and a promise. That means you sort of clean up and you promise you'll do it better later. Well, true to myself, the next day, I got a bucket of water and soap and a sponge and a scrubbing brush and a knife I was going to detail my kitchen. I set out like gangbusters and I was doing a really good job until I got to that one place, maybe you have it in your kitchen, where the refrigerator meets the cabinet or an appliance or something, and it's only a half an inch. It's only a half an inch wide, yet everything and anything can fall down that little space, and you can't get in there to clean it. Well, now I'm on my hands and knees, and I look down and I see a little shrimp swimming in a wading pool of red sauce. Well, I couldn't leave it there. I called Joe. Joe, come here. We got to move the refrigerator. Move the refrigerator? Why? Well, because we're living in this house 11 years. The refrigerator was here when we got here, and we never moved it. So it's time. So between the two of us, we huffed and we puffed, and we moved the refrigerator out of the way. And then we saw the archaeological dig on the floor under the refrigerator. There were pennies and grapes and olives and pieces of paper and pencils, a piece of rope, and a recipe card that I had been looking for forever. And Joe looked one look at it at that convention of dust bunnies and said, oh, I have to go to the post office. I'll be right back. And out the door he goes. All right, back to square one. I get the dustpan and the brush to sweep up all the stuff. And that little piece of rope was, I guess, stuck to the floor. It wouldn't come up. So I reached down and I grabbed a hold of it and I yanked it. And all of a sudden, there was a crack on my floor in the shape of a rectangle. And I realized that piece of rope was a handle to a trap door. There was a trap door underneath my refrigerator. And I didn't know. And of course, I pulled it all the way up and I looked down into a black hole. There was a ladder. This house didn't have a basement. I know. I walked all the way around the outside. There's no access. There's no windows. There's no under the refrigerator. Well, I got the flashlight out of the drawer, and miracle of miracles, it worked. And I went down that ladder into, I'm not going to call it a basement because it was more like a cellar would be a better word. And I looked around. Now, my house was built in the 1950s, but the construction down here was a whole lot different. The foundation walls were just regular rocks, not cinder blocks, and the supports were rough-hewn pieces of lumber. And then I looked up and I knew why my living room floor was so wavy. And I said, this looks like a barn. This looks like a barn, but wait a minute. Barns don't even have basements. But that's what it looks like. And then I thought of something. You see, the house next door to mine was built in the 1920s. And that house, if you live in the Tree Streets, you know this, is believed to be the first fire station in the area. And it's built a little different than all the other houses because it has a daylight basement. Because underneath the house, they kept the fire wagon. And in my property was a field with a small barn where they kept the horses that pulled the wagon. Well, why did they just leave this here? It still didn't make any sense. And I'm looking around and I notice right in the center of the basement is a huge, huge crate. And I go over and inspect it, and it has straw in it, and there's whiskey bottles in the straw. And what is this rot gut doing down here? And then I kind of got worried because maybe there's mice and snakes or who knows what else. So I ran up the ladder. Where's Joe? Where's Joe? He's never here when I need him. And I'm walking back and forth, and I'm looking out the door, and I'm saying, Joe, where are you? And then I realize what I'm looking at. Out my back door, I can see Montrose Court Apartments. Now, Montrose Manor apartments were built in the 1922 also. They were luxury apartments. And it's rumored that that was the hideout of none other than Al Capone. So I'm thinking, if Al Capone was less than 400 feet from my house, where there's something in the basement, a lot of whiskey bottles, could that be a coincidence? Well, I'm not from here, and I heard things, but I didn't pay attention. But now I got out my phone and I started Googling Prohibition, Al Capone, Montrose Manor, Montrose Court, Speakeasy. Oh, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree, and I started reading, and oh my, I now know why Johnson City is called Little Chicago. It has to do with location, location, location. Where else would you have a never-ending supply of whiskey flowing down the mountain, right up to the railroad tracks, where it could get on 3 different rail lines and go 30 miles and be in different states? That moonshine flowed right into the Hotel Windsor and the John Seaver Hotel. And let me just say that those 2 places were dens of iniquity. And because this is a family-friendly show, I'm not going to go on about what happened there. But there were a number of speakeasies in Johnson City. They were even disguised behind grocery stores. It was very easy to get shot and killed in Johnson City. Now, there were tunnels too, that were escape routes out the back door of the speakeasies. But you didn't have to worry about getting caught because chances were most of the police, there were only 12 of them, were on the take, and the judges were on the take. And the big shots brought in the high-powered lawyers, and you only got a slap on the wrist anyway. And even if you got sent to jail, you could break out. And you can check this by reading up about the Wheelock brothers. Break out of jail, just like that. Now I'm thinking that the fire chief was on the take, because why else would be a bunch of whiskey bottles in my basement? Joe finally came home, and I wanted to tell him about the whole thing, and I started with, well, you know how everybody was making sourdough bread? He didn't even let me get to the Cioppino part. he could see the trapdoor behind me in the kitchen, and he ran right over it and went down there, and I followed him with the flashlight because I'm prepared. And he's an engineer, a structural engineer, and he's looking around and he's going, what the sugar? This is family friendly. How the sugar? Anyway, he finds the great big crate of whiskey bottles and he picks one up. And I said, it's Rutgut. It's been down here for 75 years. And Joe said, don't you know that whiskey never goes bad if it's sealed correctly? And look at this. We've got Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, and a couple bottles of Pappy's. Do you know Pappy's? Pappy's is worth like $500 to $1,000 a bottle. And I started singing, we're in the money, honey. Well, we had to figure out how to trade this whiskey for money. It turned out it's not that easy. You can't just sell it on eBay. It's against the law. You have to sell it with a certain kind of license and you have to pay taxes on it, and it's complicated. So we thought maybe we'd go downtown and go into some of the bars, and maybe the bartenders could, tell us they knew somebody who could help us. And we weren't having much luck. We've been just about every bar in Johnson City, and then we found a little one on an alleyway. We went in there, and the bartender still wasn't very helpful. But over in the corner sat a little old man on a stool, bent over his glass of whiskey. I mean, he looked like he was part of the stool. And he said, you folks, you got some whiskey you want to get rid of? And we said, well, we might. We're just asking for a friend. He goes, well, I think I might know somebody who could help you take it off your hands. And, I know we gave him too much information, but he was the only person who was trying to help us at all. And so we talked to him, and he said he'd get back to us, and we went home. That night at 11 o'clock, the doorbell rang. And the doorbell ring never rings at 11 o'clock at night unless it's something bad. So I just peeked out the curtain, and there were two men on my porch. One was short and kind of lumpy looking. He had a brown and white pinstripe suit, had a big fat tie and a fedora hat and wingtip shoes. And the other guy was tall and thin in a sharkskin black suit with piercing blue eyes and a scar that went from his eye to his mouth. And they said, open up, this is the FTB. And I said, show me some identification, because I know that's what you're supposed to do. And they took something out of their pocket, and I opened the door to get the card, and they pushed, and I fell back against the couch, and they pushed themselves in. And that lumpy guy, he opened his coat, and he had a machine gun there. And he said, take us to the booze. And Joe and I, we didn't have any choice, because I didn't want my kitchen to be another episode on Dateline where they have a massacre in the kitchen. So we moved the refrigerator. They made a telephone call. A couple of burly men showed up, parked in my back alley, and started whipping those bottles out of my basement assembly line style. And it was all over. They said, if you know what's good for you, you'll keep your mouth shut. And Joe and I went back in the living room and sat down, and Joe said, I don't believe it. I don't believe that just happened. He said, easy come, easy go. And I said, well, you know what? I also read that Al Capone was worth $100 million, and they never found the money. Maybe if we go downstairs and dig around, we might find the money. And Joe said, Betty Ann, no, just no. We're not moving that refrigerator again. And don't even make any cioppini ever again either. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that story. I hope you shore up the foundation after that episode. Our next storyteller is Marjorie Schaefer. She Been away a while, but we're